We're here on the beach in South Carolina visiting a friend. Her name's Anne Bonny. Now, Anne is about 9 foot 3 inches long, last time someone checked, 425 pounds, and she lives somewhere out in those waters.
Our friend's a great white shark, a carcharodon carchariot.
That's right. Anne Bonny is a juvenile female great white shark. And she's been living off the coast here of South Carolina this winter. And in fact, her tracker was pinged just a few days ago, just north of here, closer to the North Carolina shore. Now, her presence in these waters and the yearly journey she takes up and down the Atlantic coast is testimony to an amazing conservation success story. The return of the apex predator, the great white shark.
We'll tell you her tale today on 9 Worlds. I'm coming in, Bonnie.
No! I don't know if you should swim with Bonnie.
Cold. Welcome to the beach.
Hello, friends. We are so excited today to bring you the story of Anne Bonny, a juvenile shark who might be about your age, but definitely is not your size. Anne Bonny was first tagged in April 2023, just off the coast of North Carolina. Now, that year, tracking data showed our friend traveling up the coast in May and June until she finally spent most of July and August around Cape Cod and the Bay of Fundy.
But once cold weather started setting in, she began her journey back down south to spend December and January in the waters off South Carolina coast, not far from where we went to visit her.
You see, Anne Bonny is a snowbird, just like all great white sharks living in the Atlantic and a number of humans living along the I-95 corridor.
White sharks travel up and down the coast with the seasons, moving south for the winter and moving north for the summer.
And right about now, as spring breakers are planning their sunny escapes, we're only a few weeks away from when our shark friends are thinking about journeys back up north. Now, this journey and Anne Bonny's presence in the waters off the East Coast here really is remarkable because there was a time when the future of sharks looked pretty bleak. And that time was roughly 1975, with the release of a little film you may know.
Jaws. While the movie paints sharks in a less than favorable light, the 70s were entirely a dark time.
Well, for sharks, that is.
True.
In fact, the first step in the conservation of these creatures actually occurred 3 years before the film's release, the passing of the Marine Mammal Conservation Act. Now, this was the first federal law to establish protections for marine mammals like seals and whales, manatees, even polar bears.
Mom, how many times do I have to tell people that sharks are fish and whales are mammals? They are not the same.
Yes, son, I know the difference between a shark and a whale. In fact, we recorded a whole series of videos about whales, which is really good, and you should check it out after you finish watching this.
Not sharks. But very cool.
And yes, it's also true that the Marine Mammal Protection Act helped whales, but it also helped sharks. You see, first, the Marine Mammal Protection Act was a major change in how we approached marine conservation, shifting the focus from supporting just one species to managing an entire ecosystem. And this is why it actually helped the sharks. You see, the act helped protect and restore the animals that the sharks feed on, like the gray seals in the Northwest Atlantic. So that helps sharks like the great white recover.
And sharks needed all the wins they could get after Jaws painted them as evil man-hunting killers. Spoiler alert, they are not evil man-hunting killers.
No. Yeah, while shark numbers in the US were relatively stable until the late 1960s, around the time Jaws hit the movie theaters, they started to plummet, predominantly, though not exclusively, due to overfishing.
Was it the effect of the movie? Maybe indirectly?
But certainly human-related activities put a huge dent in shark populations, causing an estimated decrease of 27 to 86% in white shark abundance from about the mid-70s to 1980 in parts of the Western Atlantic Ocean. So the timing seems well aligned with the release of Jaws. And we know that in the aftermath of the release, shark trophy hunting saw a significant surge.
So there may be some truth to the Jaws effect on shark numbers.
Shark fishing tournaments gained popularity in the United States, reaching their peak in the period around the 70s to the 90s, and only recently experiencing a decline, in part due to conservation efforts and raising public awareness. So if Anne Bonny was born a decade or two earlier, she could have become a trophy on someone's wall. And sadly, I'm sad right now. I don't want to think about Anne Bonny as a trophy on someone's wall. No trophy.
And while the US has prohibited the hunting of white sharks for decades, these creatures still suffer from bycatch, getting unintentionally caught in fishing operations targeting other species.
Sharing the same habitats and food sources as other large pelagic animals, white sharks often fall victim to these fisheries, facing injury or death from hooks and gear.
Limits on the use of gill nets, which have the very friendly nickname of curtains of death, have helped our shark friends.
These nets are deployed for fishing or sometimes even along beaches to help mitigate shark-human interactions. They inadvertently entangle and kill the sharks and sometimes other large marine life. So fewer nets, fewer chances for Anne Bonny to get all caught up in one and die.
But perhaps the most brutal shark fishing practice is known as finning.
This is when fishers catch a shark, cut off its fins, and then dump it back in the water. And without its fins, the shark will just bleed out or suffocate and die. This brutal practice, which also increased in the 1980s, was driven by demand for shark fin soup. And even with global protections against this practice that help reduce the risk to sharks like Anne Bonny, white sharks continue to be hunted for their fins.
But here's where we get into the good news. After declines during the 80s, white shark populations have appeared to stabilize in the 1990s and now are on the upswing. Whew. Up, swing.
I'm gonna swing my arms
That's
like
walking.
This positive trend is almost certainly a direct result of the conservation efforts to safeguard white sharks. South Africa took the lead in these in 1991 as the first country to implement protective measures for these predators. The U.S. followed suit with protections including the establishment of the Fishery Management Plan for Sharks of the Atlantic Ocean in 1993 and the Prohibited Shark Species Group in 1997, which included white sharks on the list of the 19 species of Atlantic shark that currently fishers cannot possess or retain in any form.
There's one last piece of the shark success story, and it has to do with the success of another fish that's way smaller than the white shark, the menhaden.
While humans don't eat this fish, it has many other commercial uses besides food. It's also a keystone species in the food web. You see menhaden are filter feeders. They eat plankton.
And then bigger fish eat the menhaden, and then adult white sharks eat the bigger fish.
The Atlantic menhaden fishery operated with minimal regulation until about 2012, probably about the same time our friend Anne Bonny was born, at which point harvest limits were established in response to an overfished and dwindling menhaden population. Now, following the implementation of these regulations, there's been a notable resurgence in menhaden numbers, with the species growing and reclaiming and expanding into its historic range. So as Anne Bonny grew up, there'd be more food to help her grow big and strong. Taken together, all these factors, global protections, fishery management, ecosystem recovery, and a focus not on one species, but on the entire food web, has made it far more likely for a shark like Anne Bonny to live to hang out on the coast today.
But based on what we know, Anne Bonny is still a juvenile, so her story is just beginning.
And white sharks grow slowly and are long-lived. Their lifespan is probably about the same as ours, around 70 years. Females can take up to 33 years to reach maturity. Additionally, we think they have long gestation periods. So all this added together means that they reproduce at very slow rates. So if our friend Anne Bonny was born even a decade earlier, she would have faced all of these obstacles, making it really hard for her to grow to the age of maturity when she could produce baby sharks. I said baby shark.
Ugh. And here's where Anne Bonny's story brings us to the Carolina coast. Go turn off the camera.
There's lots we don't know about sharks still, but one major piece of the puzzle that scientists would love to figure out is where are their mating grounds and where are the babies born. There's some evidence recently that at least for Atlantic sharks, that could be right here off the Carolina coast. So it's possible that Anne Bonny isn't just here visiting for the winter. It could be that this is also where she was born and where one day she'll come back, mate, and have her own baby sharks.
So maybe Anne Bonny will return here one day to mate and have her own baby sharks, which would be really great. But also it may only happen if we can maintain the conservation efforts that are helping protect her and her shark friends.
But Anne Bonny's future isn't without risk.
It's true, despite the intelligent and curious and even a little anxious nature of white sharks, they are still seen as dangerous manhunters. And some think shark attacks are increasing in places like South Carolina and other spots along the Atlantic coast.
But are they?